What's up everybody, another beautiful day in the Dragon Isles, and we're back with some Mythic raid guides. And today we're finally taking a look at Mythic Raszageth, final boss of the raid. Long guide might get long. Now I'll be going over most of the mechanics, how to deal with them, and our overall tactic for this fight. And if you have any questions or suggestions for the fight, hit me up in the comments. Now setup wise, you want 2 tanks, 4 healers, and 14 DPS. Evokers are great for this due to time spiral and rescue. On top of this, having access to multiple roars and wind rushes helps a lot. Gateway I'd say is mandatory, and shamans, aka purge bots, makes phase 1 and phase 2 prog a lot easier. And the fight is fairly melee friendly. Melee DPS rejoice. Now this fight is mainly single target with a few AoE moments during first and second intermission. So most players should have builds that maximize single target but also are able to do AoE. Now it's fine to have 1 or 2 pure single target builds like Arms Warrior. They're insanely good for last phase, but not that awesome for the ads. But you can easily carry 1 or 2 of them. And Grief Torch, use as many as you are able. It almost doesn't matter what eye level they are. And this is due to the fact that there's a few DPS checks for this fight where you have to burst an insane amount of damage in a very short window of time. And Grief Torch does just that. Now I'm not saying you need 20 of them, because you don't, but a few of them sure helps. So with that said, what's new for Raszageth on Mythic? Well, the static charge no longer leaves a static field on the ground, so on Mythic you have to deal with the pushbacks without these. Yay! And the volatile sparks have 1 additional charge, so it requires 1 additional crowd control. And the same is true for the phase 2 sparks. That, and everything hurts a ton more. Now during first intermission there's now a red and blue platform. It works the same way, but the red platform spawns a Flamesworn Herald in each ad pack, and the blue side spawns a Frostforged Zealot. Flame ad gets a huge absorb on them and starts casting Blazing Roar. If it goes off, you die. So you need to burst down the absorb first. And this is one of the Grief Torch angles, if you will. Pop Grief Torch, break shield. Now the Frostforged Zealot casts Shattering Shroud after a few seconds. This deals damage to everyone on blue side and gives them a huge healing absorb. And if this absorb isn't out healed in time, everyone on blue side dies. And in phase 2, these storm charged marks, red and blue, their damage has been increased by like 1000%, so running into the opposite mark will instantly kill you and anyone around you. And on top of this, boss will cast Inversion during this, inverting a couple of players' marks, so a few blue becomes red and vice versa. The Tempest Wing Pushback, when you pass through it, each player AoEs around them, like the sausage in Mythic Sepulchre. On top of this, the Big Circle Fulminating Charge targets 3 players and they get rooted rather than slowed now. And these 2 works the same in phase 3 as well. During second intermission there's an extra Colossal Storm feed, and in phase 3 there's tiny tornadoes, and these tornadoes are being drawn from the enclosing storm and travels towards boss. And the boss will nom these if they reach her and heal her for 5% and increase her damage by 20%, so a wipe. Now players who soak these gets a stack of Storm Spite. Ticking damage lasts forever and stacks infinite. So how do we deal with all of this? Starting off with phase 1, which is one off, if not the hardest part of the fight. Not from being overly complicated, there's just a ton of small things that can go wrong, and if you lose 1 or 2 players, it's pretty much a wipe. Now the goal is to get boss to 65% before the 5th pushback goes off, or rather you want to push boss during that cast. So you will deal with a total of 4 pushbacks and 3 sets of sparks. Now the main cause of wipes here is sparks, pushback, and lightning breath, combined with autopilot mode after 200 pulls. But let's break those down a bit, starting with the pushbacks. Now on Mythic, these static charges no longer spawns the stuff on the ground that keeps you safe during pushbacks. Due to this, you will be tanking boss next to the edge, have a gateway going from this location and straight back through the middle. And each class/spec needs to have a set of mobility abilities that they use for these pushbacks to survive them. Some classes like warriors or shamans have an easier time with this, some have it a bit more difficult where they have to weave in several different abilities to make it, and some play priest. Now on the priest note, as far as I know, they can't deal with these unless they play Void Elf or perhaps Goblin. Now even after the nerfs they're going to need some love, so you really want an evoker, rescue, or 2 for the priest. Should be fine with 1 evoker and you can rescue the 2nd and 4th pushback, and the priest just legs it on the 1st and gateways the 3rd. Now evokers also have time spiral, which is insanely good for this. Now depending on how many many evokers you have, you can assign them to either 3rd or 4th pushback, or both if possible. And keep in mind, with this strat, you will only be able to use gateway once during phase 1, or you can use it on 1st and have it back for 4th, but it's really not needed on 1st. And for most classes and specs, using gateway on 1st can even make you lose uptime, unless you're a priest. So for the pushbacks themselves, the whole raid wants to gather on the Raz's butt and get pushed back straight down the middle. The reason for going down the middle is because boss always casts lightning breath after a pushback, except for the second pushback where it sparks instead. So you want to bait those breaths down the middle, which makes it a lot easier to dodge. But be prepared that it might not always go down the middle, so always look where it's aiming after a pushback or as the pushback ends and dodge accordingly. This is where you'll mostly lose people to breaths. It can be hard to tell sometimes exactly where the breath is going, but always overdo it when you dodge the breath to be safe. Run a little bit extra and you won't lose that much damage, but you'll live. And then there's sparks. Now another thing you're gonna wipe on a lot are the volatile sparks. Each spark spawns with 3 charges, so 1 more than on heroic. So you'll need to crowd control 1 additional spark per spark. Now, due to the fact that a lot of classes and specs do not have access to that many CCs, you need to organize this a bit. Cue the picture. So we split this up into 12 spark locations, if you will, and we assigned 8 of them with 2 players and the rest with 1 player. You want squishier classes players in solo locations. Now take care how you assign these. You ideally want slow pokes in the back, speedy classes further up front. Make sure that each spark location is covered with different AoE and single target CCs, like Stun Totem, Ring of Peace, Ring of Frost, so spread these out. And if you play Horde, you can use Arcane Torrent here as well. It's really good, but not something you have to have. Now on top of this, everyone in the raid should use a variation of this big brain macro. So what this insane big brain macro does is targets a spark for you, throws an ability at him, and retargets boss without actually ever losing target from the boss. So what you need to do is replace Axe Toss in this macro with whatever ability you'll be using. You can put your interrupt in there and it will instantly interrupt a rando spark. For me, I replace Axe Toss with Purge, which does not have a cooldown. So as long as I'm spamming that macro, I will purge sparks around me without actually having to target them. And you can put in single target stuns, anything. Big brain macro. And yeah, shamans are crazy here overall due to purge. As long as they're in range, they can clear a ridiculous amount of sparks. Just keep purging.
What is my purpose?
You press purge.
Oh my god.
Furthermore, to help you learn these spark locations, you should use as many world marks as you need. Eventually, you'll be able to remove more and more world marks, and eventually all of them or most of them, because you will need them in later phases. But as a start, go nuts. During phase 1, you will always drop them in the exact same location, so it's all about building muscle memory. Now, the tricky spark, if you will, is the second and third set. Second one follows a pushback, so you need to be a lot quicker on your feet and rush over there as soon as the pushback ends. Third overlaps with static charge, so there's a big chance that players that get static charge, which is the big circle, won't make it back in time to drop their spark. They should instead just drop them as close as possible to the other sparks, so you don't have a huge distance between them. However, be prepared that this can happen. Some classes are just hella slow. Some players are just hella dumb. Now regardless, it will happen and it's very manageable as long as these players pipe up on voice comm and utter the sacred phrase that is, "I will drop spark far back," then you can solve it. Now I really can't emphasize enough how important the sparks are, and the faster you learn how to do them properly, the better your prog is going to go. Damage doesn't matter, uptime doesn't matter, just get those sparks done, because they will return again in phase 2, so better make it a habit. Now for these static charges, you want to drop these behind the raid, one to the right, one mid, one left. There are weakauras that you can use that assigns you to either left or right, or you can just YOLO it a bit. Damage is distance based, so the further marks are from each other, the better. Make sure you have a defensive or external on you if you get static charge. It does hurt a lot. One more important thing is that phase 1 will last approximately 3 minutes, and you will need some DPS cooldowns trinkets to be ready for intermission. So for example, if a DPS needs to pop Grief Torch or other 2-minute cooldowns on the first and second set of ads, they can only use 2-minute cooldowns on pull in phase 1, and then they have to hold them for whichever whatever ad set they're gonna pop off on. So I'm sorry, even if your Grief Torch is resetting, save it. Now the first intermission ad pack is around 3 minutes and 15-20 seconds mark, and the second one is around the 350 mark. More on this soon, but yeah, manage your DPS cooldowns properly so that you're able to do intermission as well. Now as far as tank stuff goes in phase 1, there's not a whole lot to it. One of our tanks actually fell asleep during phase 1, but the important part, which is really important, is positioning. Boss needs to be on the edge of glory and lined up with the gateways, so it's pretty much dead center. If it's not, people will start getting pushbacked all over the place and blame the tanks. So our tanks had one of them start by pulling it slightly out to the side, and after the first tank busted, the other tank taunted it so it moved into its correct position slightly to the side. And yeah, you want to transition to intermission 65% during the 5th pushback cast. So, first intermission. Now like I mentioned earlier, there's blue and red platform now. Red to the left, blue on the right. You need to split your raid into 2 for these, just like on Heroic. For us, we had 9 players on the red side, 1 healer, 1 tank, 7 DPS, 11 on the blue side, 3 healers, 1 tank, and 7 DPS. Blue side requires a lot more healing due to the healing absorbs. Red side needs a lot more single target burst damage to be able to nuke down each Flame Herald absorb before their cast goes off. And this is why you can't use some of your DPS cooldowns during phase 1, because you need them for these. Grief Torch is absolutely insane for these, so take that in consideration. On the blue side, for the first and the third ad pack, you just heal forehead, but you need to burst down 1 mob super fast, which is the second ad pack Zealot. This one you want to kill before it casts Shroud, which is the healing absorb. And again, Grief Torch is very effective at bursting this down, but all blue side players needs to prepare and set up so they can smite the Zealot, because you have sub 10 seconds in total. Needs to die. Now these small caster ads also needs to be interrupted constantly, so you need CC rotation for each ad pack for both sides, as well as 1 or 2 interrupts per caster per side. But a lot of the time you'll be able to kill him during stuns and silences. So for example, on blue side, first pack we had DH stun into stun totem plus a solar beam, which we used if the breath came during these ads, so we could move him. Silent Sigil is great for this as well, but you can also use mass grip, bomb libs, knockbacks to get him out of the breath, whatever you need. Regardless, make sure each side has AoE CC set up for each pack and emphasize that it's extremely important to do these properly or people will die. Other than that, there's a few things you can do to make intermission easier. First of all, Raszageth will use her breath on either red or blue platform alternating. You just never know which one is first. Now this can mostly be baited. Now there's a debate going on as how this actually works. Some say it targets the largest clump of players, but some have suggested that it instead targets the largest amount of players in a possible breath path, as you can see in this award-winning picture, the latter making it a bit harder to work around. Regardless, what we did to bait it consistently was just move as one group, because then we knew we were gonna get it. So for example, red side here gets first breath during first ad, then they chill away from the second ad until the next red side breath starts, before running into melee with that ad. You can just rush over instead of waiting for the breath, but then you will get breath on them, which makes nuking them down and keeping them interrupted a lot more difficult. On blue side, we waited a lot less. It was more a, if a breath is about to spawn on blue side as we're running towards an ad, we'd stop and bait it for like 2 seconds, otherwise we just dealt with the ads during breath. But again, on both sides you can just wait a bit to always get decent breath. Tanks, keep in mind that for some of these ad packs, DPSers will need to burst instantly. I know our tanks even used shocking disclosure pots here for one of the packs just to help with snap threat. Tricks, misdirect is great if you have it, and tanks just communicate with your DPSers. My side's tank would call if he had less burst threat than usual before they spawned, so we'd give him an extra global or so, or some of us did. But threat can be a real issue here because you need to burst fast and tanks only have so many globals, so be smart. And phase 2 starts around 1.5 minutes after you've landed on blue and red platform, or when one platform have cleared all their ads. So make sure both sides kill their last set of ads within a few seconds of each other, otherwise you're effectively stealing time from the other side. And you also want to milk intermission to get cooldowns back, so there's no use in instantly getting over or pushing it faster. Just want to push it before phase 2 actually starts. So you made it to phase 2. A few things here. First of all, sparks again. Boss boss will be tanked in the middle of the room and we just mimic phase 1 positions but in the middle instead. Now this might take a pull or two to pull off, and you can use a few raid marks here as well for start of phase 2 prog to make it easier, but in reality your specific spark position relative to where boss is the same as phase 1. I drop mine dead center under boss or in front of boss in phase 1 and exactly the same in phase 2. The only thing that has changed is where the dragon is, not where my spark is. Hope that makes sense. Now these sparks tends to be a bit less stacked, so be prepared to purge, interrupt, etc. a few that are further out. Otherwise it works like in phase 1 with AoE cooldowns and everything like that. Next out is the Storm Surge marks and the Absorb Shield. Now the raid damage during this is insane, so you really want to burn them down fast. Now the way we deal with these are everyone spreads around the boss. Avoid standing underneath boss. Even as melee, you can stand really far out and still slap boss. Now, as soon as marks go out, if you're blue, you run in and stack dead center under boss, and red marks stand still to let blue marks run past them. Following that, all the red marks cuddle up in smaller group that then collapses into a big red group if they're close enough. So red marks, if you're right next to another red mark, stack up, then move together towards a stack location or bigger group like its tail or whatever. Now you don't have to collapse into a bigger group, it just makes healing easier. However, you want to be at least 3 red marked players in each stack, and this is due to inversion, because every now and then Rasa will swap marks in a few players, so some blue marks goes to red and vice versa. So if there's a group with only 2 red marks and one of them gets inverted, well then the other red mark will have to run and find a new group, and anytime you aren't cuddling the same mark, you don't get the 200% damage and healing buff, and you need it. Now I really recommend getting a weakauras that screams, shouts, and air horns whenever your mark is inverted. It's a dumb thing to die from. There is a bit of grace period before you blow up, so you don't need to pre-spread for inversion, you just need to start running instantly as you're inverted. Now for the fulminating charge circle, you want melee to spread behind boss and range to spread further behind boss. Now this will mainly target range, but it can target melee, and all targets get rooted. So the goal here is for the marked players to not hit each other with these, as multiple stacks of the dot are not fun on Mythic. So if possible, you want to either remove it yourself if you can, shapeshift, or Blessing of Freedom or Tiger's Lust. And you want to use it on at least 2 of them so they can run away from the last one. And the rest of the raid of course needs to run away from them as well. Now if you can't separate 2 or 3 of these circles, a tank can jump in between and soak these to get the new circles and debuffs instead as a last resort. And lastly, there's Tempest wings. On Mythic, when you're hit by the ring, you AoE splash around you. So prior to a Tempest wing, everyone spreads out so that they don't splash each other. You need to get through this as fast as possible as it hurts a lot on Mythic. So if you have things that'll let you only take 1 tick or no ticks, make sure you have them ready for this. Wild Charge, Feral Lunge, Transcendence, things like that. You can also grip, gateway, and rescue through it to help certain slow pokes like priests. TLDR, the faster you get through the wave, the better. So at the start of phase 2, you want to spread around boss, prepare for first absorb. As soon as the absorb is done, spread and get ready for Tempest wings into fulminating charge circle. As soon as you're done with wings, get behind boss and spread for the charges. A bit after these charges, you will get your first spark, and shortly after that, you get your second absorb. 15 to 20 seconds after the second absorb, you'll get your second set of sparks into pushback into new fulminating charges. Shortly after that, you get a new pushback into third spark into third absorb. Now this one can be a bit rough as you need to instantly spread after you've dropped your sparks, so you aren't really able to move around a lot to purge or interrupt or stun. And on top of this, there's only 40 seconds between spark 2 and spark 3. So if you use a lot of crowd controls on the second one, you won't have all of it back for the third one. So I recommend some players just not use their AoE crowd control on the second one, so you have everything ready for the third one, as it is harder to deal with. And phase 2 intermission starts as soon as the third absorb is done. Now the lower you can get boss before intermission, the better. We aim to be below 42%, and anything below that just makes last phase a lot easier. So intermission. Again? So this time there's 3 big ads, which means 3 sets of small ads whenever they teleport around. Cue the Pikasha. So you want 3 marks here for the big ads: square, skull, and X. Melee on the left ad marked with a blue square, range on top on skull marked ad, and a gateway going from between square and skull mark towards skull marked ad. Range, you want to stay spread around the skull mark, and melee you want to clump up near the square ad. If all goes well, breath hits melee and not range for the first one. When the adds teleport, you want to stack and stun all of the small adds in the middle of the platform. They all run towards the big ad that spawned them, so make sure you don't slow them. No frost shock padding, because if you slow a few of them, they will be desynced, which is bad. So as they converge in the middle, you either vortex stack or mass grip them into tons of stuns, and you want to kill them as fast as possible. During all of this, the big ad will shower the raid with balls. So Dance Dance Revolution. When the ads are dead or about to die, melee get back to the big ad on the left side and nuke it down as much as possible before it teleports again. Range, you want to stack on gateway between square and skull to bait the second breath, and then you just gateway away from it. They'll land in position to nuke skull ad again when it teleports back there. So when they teleport again, melee starts smacking the new ad in the same location and range the skull ad that just appeared. The small ads that spawn you want to CC in the middle of the room, so as they run towards the middle, you want to have a ring of frost there so they run into that, and you follow that up with a mass root. If you get one more set of small ads and you have a second druid, you want to mass root them as well. Otherwise, you need to use things like knockbacks, ring of peace to keep them away from the raid. Now, when a big ad die, any small ads that it has spawned will instantly despawn, which is why you just don't want to waste damage on them and you keep them CC'd instead. Anyways, shortly after the second set of small ads spawn, you want to kill skull and square ad at the same time. If range is lagging behind on skull, you can assign a few melee to run over to even it out, so they die roughly at the same time. When they die, bait breath away from the last ad and then run over, finish it off. Keep in mind that this ad will deal a ton more raid damage and the balls are real nasty now. So dodge and slap away. Now keep in mind that this intermission is only like 1.5 minute long or so you won't be able to use a lot of DPS cooldowns, if any at all here, because you really want them ready for start of phase 3 where you bloodlust. And with that said, let's take a look at phase 3. So phase 3 is very scripted, fairly easy to execute as long as you get there with everyone alive. Literally any phase 3 pull can be a kill. So as soon as you land in phase 3, you want to pop bloodlust, third combat pot and slap away. There's no mechanics for the first 30 seconds, so make sure to just nuke away. Put up a mark as you can see here and a gateway going from it and straight across the platform. 30 seconds into phase 3, you'll get your first pull charge. This player needs to run an AFK on top of the marked gateway and grip everyone there. When you land, everyone takes a few steps back, spread a little bit and wait for the first fulminating charge. Everyone that doesn't get charge, use gateway to gate away from him. The 3 charge player needs to run away from each other and try not to overlap it, just like in phase 2. Freedom, Tiger's Lust and a tank can help soak if needed. The second pull charge, you want to put dead center of the room underneath the boss. Second pull charge is always followed by Tempest wings. You get grip to the middle, you run out and spread away from the boss and you deal with the wave. Keep in mind that if you touch the storm outside, you get a stack of the everlasting dot. One is fine, multiple aren't. Now it is really easy to panic here, but really just focus on spreading and getting through the wave fast, and possibly a defensive. The third pull charge you want to again put on top of the marked gateway, wait for charges to go out, but this time players without charges needs to run. So Windrush, roar, run! The charge player will not be able to spread this properly, so put 2 immunity soakers in there, so they can spread the circle to them, and then they run out and immune it. And the fourth pull charge is the same as the second one, but with way less space to deal with the following Tempest wing pushback. So grip into the middle, run out and spread and get through the wave fast. And following this, before the third set of fulminating charges, you want everyone in the raid to stack on top of the marked gateway, and players without charge, gate away. Players with charge, run out in the storm and die. Immune if they have, otherwise just die. Now other than that, while doing all of this, you also constantly have to soak the aforementioned tiny tornadoes. If one reaches boss, you're screwed. So everyone needs to constantly be on the lookout for these tornadoes. Tanks can soak a metric ton of these, and they should. Just keep in mind that each tornado soaked gives you a dot stack that lasts forever. So the more you soak, the more damage you take. So don't go Omega, Pepega, Pop, Sprint and soak 18 of these instantly, because you will die. Everyone just soak a little all the time and you'll be fine. Now this gets more hectic the smaller the room gets, but it's a simple mechanic as long as you remember that it's there. Now tanks, keep in mind that Raz Tank Buster Blast hurts a ton on Mythic, so make sure you have ample defensive cooldowns for each blast blast so the raid doesn't die. Absorbs or damage reduction, not things like Guardian Spirit or Vamp Blood. Tanks need to not take damage or as little as possible from it. And keep in mind, if you're using absorbs like AMS or Cocoon to mitigate the blast, if you have a ton of tornado dot stacks, they will eat your absorb. So you need to pop it last second and preferably overlap with some mitigation as well. But yeah, again, this phase is very scripted, and the thing that's gonna wipe you is panic. Pure and simple. So my biggest tip for that, while you're flying from phase 2 platform to phase 3 platform, take a long ass deep breath before you land. Then just focus. And yeah, that's pretty much it for Mythic Raszageth. Hope it helps y'all out. Let me know what you think of this fight on Mythic, if or when you've downed it. And if you have any questions at all about this encounter, hit me up in the comments or become a patron and Twitch sub and get access to the Stankie Discord, where you can get help with anything raiding related. I'm also streaming all of my raid progression on Twitch, so make sure to check that out, Stankie Gaming. And don't forget the usual stuff, like, comment, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.